everyone. My name is David McLeod, and I am your life mastery coach and author of the delightful little book, A Life to Die For. I'm also one of the co-authors in the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care. And also, I just want to let you know, I'm going to be releasing my own book here shortly. It's entitled Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment. And that, we hope, will be another best-selling book. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. Today, this is episode 251. Our topic is conscious parenting from the start. I want to welcome those of you who are here on the live program. Please feel free to add your questions or comments in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond to you as we go. You know, folks, throughout history, people have found themselves in the role of accidental parents. Who hasn't been there? With no clue about what they're supposed to do with the brand new little human being that has decided to make an appearance in their lives. But in the 21st century, we know a lot more about the subject of child rearing, and there's really no excuse anymore for accidental parents. Conscious parenting is an intentional and mindful approach that begins even before the child is born. From the moment of conception, parents are encouraged to cultivate a deep awareness of their thoughts, emotions, and actions, recognizing that these energies directly influence the developing child. This approach involves nurturing the child with love, positivity, and a strong sense of purpose, creating a foundation of security and well-being that extends into adulthood and provides a solid foundation that helps the child live a successful life. For today's episode, I've invited back my good friend, Ilene Dillon, a licensed family therapist and emotional mastery expert who has decades of experience. And she's going to be joining me as we discuss this topic in detail. So please welcome Ilene Dillon back to the program. There she is.
Hi.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ilene. I'm so delighted to have you back again. I think this is like the fourth or fifth time that you've been on my program, and we've had some great conversations in the past. I'm looking forward to another great one today.
Good. You know, I was listening to you with that introduction, and you're talking about having an awareness and being prepared before the birth of the child. And maybe there are a lot of people who can do that now. But what I'm going to be sharing today did not come from that place. What happened for me is that I had a 10-month-old child, and her father announced one day that he realized he wasn't ready to be a father and he was leaving. And I suddenly realized that it was up to me to raise the child, and I had really not given any thought. I was ready to just continue with what I knew about parenting, never gave any thought to raising a child and what was involved and what did I have to pay attention to. And what I'm going to talk about today is what I came up with when I actually did think about it. And it's worked really well, and I've been able to teach it around the world. It's my idea of I made lemonade out of lemons.
Right. Well, I think your experience is not that unique. I'm sure there's lots and lots of people who have had that experience, and that's why I refer to them as accidental parents. I mean, it's not that we had no idea that a child was coming. It's that we had no way of knowing how to prepare ourselves necessarily. And I know for myself, when my kids were born, all I knew about parenting was what I'd learned from my parents. And I have to say, honestly, most of that was pretty dysfunctional. And I realized as I was embarking on that journey that some of the things that I had learned maybe weren't so healthy. And so I needed to adopt a whole new mindset. Hopefully today people are learning at a younger age what it really means to be a parent, even before they have the physical experience of bringing a child into the world. But you know, things are changing. So tell me a little bit about your program. What is this all about, and where did it come from?
The conscious parenting you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, it came from just what you were talking about. I started looking at how my parents and my grandparents had parented, And I also looked at what qualifies a person to be a parent. And this is a question I've asked in a lot of my parenting classes. And people say, oh, you have to have love, you have to have enough money, you have to have a stable environment. And I go, no, you don't have to have any of that to become a parent.
Right. All you need is an
Actually,
XX chromosome and an XY chromosome. That's it, baby.
oh, well, well, that's part of what I came up with. The two qualifiers are: one, you get to the planet first, and two, you make yourself available. And it could be an XY chromosome, or it could be adoption or fostering or whatever.
Right.
But what that emphasizes, David, is that we haven't a clue what to do when these children show up. And when I looked at my own parents, I realized they parented by situation. They would say, when you get in this situation, this is how you should behave. And already in the early 1970s, which is when this shift happened for me, I realized that the world was changing so fast that my children were going to be in situations that I could not imagine. So what did I need to offer them to handle their lives when I wasn't there, when I hadn't been able to prepare them for the specific experience? And I came to the conclusion they had to have something inside of them. This is my little dog Pie. They had to have something inside of them. And the question is, how do you build stuff inside of a person as they're growing up? And that's where this idea of conscious parenting occurred. Let me just give a little bit of a framework. The framework that I eventually really settled on and work with all the time now as a psychotherapist and in my own life is that our world is a big giant school. Every one of us comes here in order to learn and grow. And the way we learn is we have experiences, and those experiences contain potential lessons for us. We can learn them. Most people don't like to learn them because we don't like to change, in which case they start repeating. We have the same issue come in again and again and again, each time getting more painful. But we have a tool that we're given to learn to identify, decode them really, the lessons more easily, and that's emotions. Every emotion gives us a message that will say, okay, you feel lonely. The message from loneliness is you have more energy going out than coming in. So the way to decode the experience you're having is to find a way to bring more energy back in. And the most effective way to do that is to do something you have a talent for doing or something you love doing. And that'll bring love right back into you, and the loneliness just fades away. And so, but I didn't have that clear picture when I started. What I first fastened on was I needed my children to start making decisions. And so even as a little tiny kid, I would ask my daughter, do you want to, I would even, point to it. Do you want to wear the white socks or the green socks today? She was 10 months old. She started making decisions. And that eventually evolved into, yes, my child makes decisions and they're not always good decisions. And how do I teach my child to process decisions that they've made that aren't beneficial? So the other part of this that I began to see is that when we're parents, we tend to think of ourselves as the teacher and the child as the learner. But in the giant school, that's not so. Adults, parents are teachers, and they're also learners. And children are learners, and they're also teachers. And may I tell you a story about my son that illustrates this? So my son was 3 years old. Let me start back. I was 3 years old. I was almost 3 when my father came back from World War II and took me and my slightly older sister away from our birth mother. So my life changed considerably without explanation, because nobody thought children had any emotions and didn't need to talk about it. So my life changed when I was 3. My son is now 3, and my parents come to visit. And we had about 4 little kittens. They were kind of brand new kittens. And I didn't want to have a lot of hassle, so I put them in my daughter's room and closed the door. And I don't think my parents were there more than 2 hours before I noticed that my son was missing. And when I started going out to find him, there he was in that room, picking up the kittens and putting their faces in the liquids where they could die. He was just trying to feed them, you know. And so I took him out of the room and I said, no, you can't be in here. Well, he kept going back to this room. So I went to the hardware store and I bought a screen door latch and put it up so high he couldn't reach it. That did not stop him. He went out the back door, climbed up a railing, opened a window of the room and went inside, and I found him there again. And I was quite frustrated and I was edging on being angry. And my father said, ho, 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 he's a chip off the old block. Meaning he was behaving just the way I behaved when I was 3. Well, I kept telling him why we couldn't do it, whatever. And my dad said, oh, he'll calm down after we leave. And indeed, when they left in a week, he calmed down. And 4 or 5 days later, I was sitting at the table having lunch with him. And we talked about this fact because as soon as my parents left, he stopped doing this with the kiddies. And so I said to him, why do you think you kept going into the kiddies when your grandma and grandpa were here? And this little 3-year-old looked at me and said, Grandma and Grandpa were really angry with you when you were little. Okay? And that is when it hit me. Oh my gosh. I mean, this is 35 years later, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somehow my son is teaching me by putting himself in my place to do things that upset. They see, when I came from my birth mother, I hadn't been well taken care of. My sister and I didn't know there were family rules or anything you had to do, or that we didn't know how to listen to adults. I mean, we were really very challenging. And here he was doing something that was very challenging, that was vexing to me. So he was literally putting himself in the place I had been when I was 35 years older ago, in order to help me see something. I'm assuming in order to, because it really did get me to see it. And it illustrated to me, and I don't know how kids do it, but I've worked with it in therapy with many, many families. And kids really do put themselves out and even get themselves in trouble in order to help the parents see things. And that's the way they teach. They react to the parents, or they put themselves in the place of the parent, or they misbehave so that the parent has to pay attention to the situation.
Well, that's really an amazing story. I don't think I've ever heard you share that one before.
Nope.
That's a powerful story, and I'm not really quite sure what to make of it personally. The fact that he was able to tap into something that happened to you when you were a child, and then decide that he had to show this to you. There's something really, really deep about that I think transcends just normal human interaction. I think there's something spiritual and maybe divine going on there,
conscious
that's well
parenting
beyond.
is it.
Right.
I'm sorry.
What I'm getting at though is just
based.
the experience itself. There's something going on there that defies ordinary explanation, right?
Exactly. And I think conscious parenting takes us there too.
Right. But parenting, this is not just the unique thing about parenting. Stuff like that happens between any arbitrary 2 people all the time. They don't even have to be related by blood. Although, in the grand scheme of things, we're all related, right? in a sense, we're all part of the same fabric of spiritual energy and all the rest of it. So those kinds of things, while they may seem extraordinary, they're not really outside the realm of possibility. They're not things that we, I guess maybe it used to be that we'd shake our heads and say that's not possible kind of thing. But nowadays it's just, okay, that's a cool thing that happened. And it's helping us, I think, all wake up to this idea of being connected to one another on a very, very deep level that transcends just, parent, child, grandchild, and down the line. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. But so what I'm learning from this, what I'm hearing from this, is that your child, your son, reflected back to you something that happened in your own life that you had forgotten about and maybe hadn't done any healing on, and it gave you that opportunity to do some deep process work. I mean, I think that's amazing. I think it's brilliant. I really do.
I also think that it's going on with our children all the time. Let me tell you another story about my other child, my daughter, who at age 10 suddenly decided she needed to have me fix her hair in the kitchen as I was trying to fix breakfast and get the kids to school. And she would say, "Mom, can you fix my hair?" And I would start immediately saying, hairbrushes do not belong in the kitchen. No, I don't want to fix your hair in the kitchen. And she did this every day for, I don't know, 5 or 6 days. It took me to realize that the whole time I was lecturing her, I was fixing her hair in the kitchen. I fixed her hair right when she brought it to me. And that made me talk about introspection. That made me realize, well, it can't be that important to not fix hair in the kitchen. It can't be that important to me. So who was it important to? Whose voice is this in my head that says no hair in the kitchen? And after looking for it for a while, I realized when I was 5, I went to live with my grandparents on the farm, which was a wonderful healing time for me. And I would go with my grandfather in the early morning to milk the cow. And when I would be with him, I would lean against the cow because the cow was warm and I was barefoot and it was cold in the early morning. And then we would stop by the smokehouse and I would pick up the baby kittens that were always there. My grandfather would stop and give them some milk. And as we came back into the house, we were walking up the stairs to the back porch. My grandmother, who was in the house making breakfast for us, would call out, "Eileen, you dust yourself off and wash your hands and face because I don't want a hair in my kitchen." Now, I was getting angry with my daughter for bringing the hairbrush in the kitchen when it didn't matter to me. And what my daughter showed me with that experience was that we can get angry about things that are important to other people and aren't necessarily important to us, and yet we think it's important to us.
Right.
And that was a
It
major
becomes
learning.
important to us because it's handed to us by our parents or our grandparents or whatever else, and we kind of adopt their way of being.
Right, and we don't even realize that we're being occupied. Now, what I have learned is that as soon as you learn the lesson, it doesn't happen anymore. So as soon as I got this, my daughter stopped bringing the hairbrush into the kitchen, and when I got it, I told her, "From now on, you have to bring the hairbrush into the kitchen for me to fix your hair. Otherwise, I'm going to get angry."
Because it's that important to me.
And she never brought it again. And it was just astounding to me. A 10-year-old would go through all of this, and it wasn't conscious. She and I talked about it. She didn't, I'm going to show my mom this. She didn't do it consciously, but there she was. And it really shows the interconnectedness of children and parents, and how, most especially as a marriage counselor and a family counselor, people think, my child is having a problem. 99 times out of 100, it's me that has something to learn, and my child is sacrificing themselves many times to get me to look at it and learn it. And this often amplifies when kids get to be teens. from my perspective, it's almost like they go, oh my gosh, I'm going to be leaving this family soon, and this person hasn't gotten their lessons yet. I better pour on the coal. And kids will have terrible, terrible childhoods,
Yeah.
teenage years,
But
desperately trying to get their parents to grow.
it's interesting. I resonate so much with a lot of what you're saying here. Um, I think first of all, I want to say that whenever I am reacting to somebody else's behavior, it's not about their behavior. It's about something inside me. That behavior, whatever it is reflecting something that I haven't dealt with inside myself. And this doesn't matter whether it's a child, my child, or whether it's just another person. Think about this. Anytime I make a judgment about another person, all I'm really doing is projecting something of myself onto that person that I'm seeing over there, and then blaming them for it rather than doing my own work. So one of the things that all of us can learn is that anytime we make a judgment, there's something going on inside. And if we take the time to pause and say, I now acknowledge that I have a judgment about you, and I recognize that this has to do with something that happened to me when I was a kid or whatever. And so I want to share my judgment with you so I can really understand it, but I don't necessarily want to judge you. And that's what we can learn from each other if we give ourselves permission to do that.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, as we see in the world today, most people are so caught up in their ego. The ego is really all about being in control, being in charge, and making you wrong so I can be right, and I can, have identity with myself and all the rest of that. And so it takes a high level of personal consciousness to be able to recognize when those projections are happening and to be able to own them and say, okay, there's something there for me to work on. When I talk about projection a lot. I talk about judgment. Well, another good word that we hear is trigger. You simply do not have the power to trigger me. You do not have the power to change my emotions, hurt my emotions, or make me feel any particular way. You have the power to behave in the way that is consistent with your own way of being, and I have the power to react. That's what we need to understand with each other. And if I choose, I can react badly and make you wrong for something how I feel, or I can take ownership of it, take responsibility for it, and I can say, Ilene, you have a way of behaving that reminds me of my mom, and it just irritates me. Thank you for showing me that reflection.
Right. Good. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate what you're saying here, David, because I think we also don't realize how much harder and more painful our lives are when we don't understand how the system is working and we don't work with it the way you're describing. You don't have to be super spiritual or whatever. This is why I like the Earth is Giant School idea.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, everything that's happening, it's the universe or God or your angels or whoever you want to look at that's conspiring to get you to learn and grow so your life can be easier, right?
Right.
And that includes unlearning or dissolving some things that you may have picked up from other people, like we've been talking about.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and so if indeed you go, okay, this is a giant school, something's happening here, what can I learn from this experience? What can I learn from my child? What can my child learn? I want to tell you one more story, if you don't mind. This is
Oh,
my
yeah.
signature
Love your
story.
stories.
Okay. Well, I have my son's permission. I had it since he was a child, and he's close to 50 now, if you believe it, to tell the story. When he was 8, he started a new school in our town. And about 3 weeks into the school, I get a call from the manager of the convenience store down in the town. We lived up on the hill. telling me that my son had been caught stealing a candy bar. And so I had told my children, they knew that the world was a giant school. He walked in the door and I said to him, "Oh, I understand today was the day you decided to learn about stealing. Is that right?" And he dropped his head and he went, "Yes." And I said, "Well, what did you learn so far?" And he said, "Stealing is not worth it. It's definitely not worth it." And I said, "That's a really important thing to know, but I don't think I've ever seen you steal anything before, so I'm curious, how did you get in the position of stealing?" And he said he was walking home with these two boys who told him they stole candy bars and it was fun, and he should do it because it would be fun for him too. Except, he said, they didn't get caught, and I did. And so I said, let me see if I got this straight. There were these two boys, I mean, these two voices outside of you that said you should steal a candy bar and it would be fun for you. Is that correct? And you listened to them and did what they said. Is that right? And he said, yeah. And I said, was there ever any other voice that you heard? And he said, yes. Well, whose voice was that? What did it say? And he said, I think it was my voice, and it said, don't do it. It's not a good idea. So I said, so you chose to listen to these two voices coming from outside of you instead of listening to the voice that was coming from inside of you that said, don't do it. It's not a good idea. Tell me something. If you could go back and live today over again, would you make the same choice or would you make a different choice? He said, I would make a different choice. In fact, Mom, from now on, I'm listening to the voice that's coming from inside of me, and I'm not listening to voices coming from outside of me. And I
Beautiful.
said, if you learn today that stealing is not worth it, and it's better to listen to the voice coming from inside of you instead of outside, those that come from outside, I think you had a very valuable day, and I want you to know I'm proud of you.
Yeah, nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
not only that, while I wouldn't recommend stealing, it's like any other experience that we have in our life, right? We may not necessarily enjoy the experience as it's happening, and we may not necessarily even realize the value of that experience as it's happening. In fact, for many of us, it might be days, weeks, months, or even years before we look back on that experience and see the gift that really came out of that. But every experience of our life, as you say, is an opportunity to grow and learn. And so therefore, it is a gift, even if it's a very unpleasant experience to go through at the start.
Mm-hmm. And that's really an important thing to remember when you're parenting. I want one little addendum to the story I just told. I can't tell you how many times I have been a therapist for a family where, especially a teenage child, steals something or does, breaks the rules somehow. And it's just hell to pay to get them to stop doing it. They do it over and over and over again. And my contention is it's because they have not learned the lesson. Because that experience for my son was a one-time learning. He didn't steal after that. One time. Imagine how different our family lives would be if we had this one-time learning experience. And what I've discovered, like in groups of adults that I've taught, almost everybody has stolen something as a child or tried to. I say, what do you remember? How many of you stole? And what do you remember about it? And almost to a person, they tell me how their parent reacted. They don't tell me anything about what they learned. And I think that's what the key is that makes a difference in conscious parenting. We're really here helping our child to establish themselves for a life on earth. And therefore, they need to develop their own ideals and principles, which is basically character. So our job as a conscious parent is to help our child decide for themselves, as I did in that story, for themselves how they want to live, how they want to conduct themselves. And the more we do that, the better the decisions are that our children make, and the less hassle it is for the parents. So it actually takes a load off of us. It may sound like a little bit of work to do at the time, but really once you get yourself and your children in the groove of learning whenever something comes up that's remarkable in their life, like stealing, um, then it gets easier and easier all the time. And now my oldest child is now 54 years old. My oldest grandchild is 28. I am looking at the impact of this because I parented differently than my parents did. And I see what I call my family is spiraling up. My children were in a better position than I was in the world, and their children are in a better position, and I expect it to happen in the next generation as well. So we not only are our lives better, our kids' lives are better, their kids' lives are better, because they're constantly looking at themselves and growing and evolving and learning. And it's really a beautiful experience. I'm so grateful I did that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You were talking earlier about, well, I think we've been talking in general about this idea of life lessons and, taking the opportunity to learn. And you also talked about giving your children permission to make their own decisions. And I think there's a big, important piece of information there that I want people to understand. The way I interpret this is, as a conscious parent, I want to give my children as much freedom as possible to live their own lives, while at the same time making sure that they're safe in whatever it is they're choosing to do. I think every child needs to learn on some level to take risks, but they want to take risks that are not likely to be terribly harmful if something goes wrong. That's the kind of thing that we need to be focused on as parents. And I see parents who are so protective of their children, they don't allow them to do anything because they have their own fear about what's going on, whereas the child maybe doesn't have this fear at all. I've heard it said that babies have only two fears: one of being of falling, and the other one of loud noises. And I'm thinking, how can anybody be afraid of a loud noise? A loud noise is just something that startles you. It's not fear inducing. It just startles. Falling, that one I can relate to, because now you feel like, whoa, where am I going, or sort of thing. But any other fear that we have in our lives is something that we learn somehow, either because someone else tells us to be afraid of it, or because we have a near miss, shall we say. Like I'm crossing the street and I'm not paying attention because I'm looking at my phone or some damn thing, and I nearly get hit by a car, or maybe the car comes screeching to a halt and actually touches me and knocks me over. Those sorts of things can wake you up and cause you to pull back, shall we say, from taking risks. So we got to find that balance between healthy risks that are going to allow me to expand and grow, while at the same time keeping the notion of safety and self-protection, in our consciousness. What do you have to say about that? And how would you bring that into the awareness of your children?
Well, interestingly, the gift that I have for people who are watching the show is a 9-item list that I sent to you, or I sent you the link. Sorry, you can have a copy too. Um, of the skills or the tasks. Like every year of life, there's a task that the child is focused on learning. Like year one, working on unity, getting it all together, identifying who I am as a unit, and including my parent in that. We don't differentiate until we're age 2. Well, there are two times in a child's life, 2 years, age 4 and age 13. 13 is 1 plus 3 is 4. So they're both essentially 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And those years are dedicated to learning personal power. And a 4-year-old comes right after a 3-year-old. I don't know how other people relate to 3-year-olds, but my 3-year-olds were just charming, sweet, delightful little creators, And then all of a sudden, they start going, my dad can beat up your dad, and stomping on bugs. The flip side of power is sadism. So they can be sadistic to their siblings, to the family pets, and so forth. And as parents, we have a tendency to try to stop the child from behaving that way, but which is understandable. What we really want to do is channel that energy in some way, give the child something to be responsible for, let them, demolish something with a sledgehammer if they're, strong enough to do that. But, it's okay. You can be sadistic. But, about the time my son was 4, I realized that I was working with a lot of clients who were in their 30s who didn't seem to have much power. And I discovered that things had happened in that year 4. And so I thought, well, my son is 3 now. He's going to be 4 soon. How can I help this person who's in a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old body realize just how enormous they are in terms of being a soul or being energy in the world? And I hit upon this idea of seeing if I could help him make his dreams come true. So I asked him, what would you, if you could do anything on your birthday when you're 4, what would you really like to do? And he said he wanted to fly a jet plane. You can relate to this as a former pilot of jets. And I went, oh, okay. But I was a single parent. I didn't have much money. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I started talking with people about it. And it turned out that we weren't able to get him to fly a jet plane, but a friend of mine owned a light plane that was hangared nearby. She got a woman flight instructor at the field to go in the plane with my son. And this was in the days before Homeland Security. My 4-year-old, for his birthday, piloted that plane across the Golden Gate Bridge.
Cool.
Right? That's where his power went. Now, the next year, he wanted to have a whipped cream fight. That was his fantasy. And so what we did is I kept doing what I could to let my children know that when they had an idea about something they'd really like to do, it could occur and it could happen. And I see that in their adult lives now. Man, nothing slows them down, and they find things. My son is remodeling his house right now. The door fell off of his oven on his stove, and he found a new stove for $500, but the guy reneged the day he was going to go get it, and so he found a new door for $100. And this is like a $12,000 stove, and it's new. My kids are doing things like that all the time. They create what they need in their lives. They get bargains for it. People give it to them free because they learned that they can go, what would I really like to have? What do I need? How do I go? What can I do to manifest it? And next thing you know, they've got it in their hot little hands.
Yeah, that's a great lesson for all of us, actually. I think, and even people, older folks like me and you, and those who maybe didn't go through that kind of conscious parenting, we can still learn those skills even at our advanced age. You don't have to be a 4-year-old to be able to learn that kind of lesson, you know?
Right.
And you don't have to go through 30, 40, 50 years of practice to get to it, you know? You can start,
Right.
if you haven't had that experience, you could start at 50, 60, or 70 years old and learn it. This whole thing about old dogs and new tricks, it's all bullshit. Don't listen to that. Any
I
dog can
agree.
learn any trick, no matter how old. And so if you have something in your mind that you dream about, that you would like to create, just trust that you have the power to do it. You know? Yeah, I know. Trying to maybe build a new rocket ship or something. Well, maybe that's not going to happen like instantaneously. But maybe you can find a way to contribute to the building of a new rocket ship that maybe goes to Mars. Maybe somehow you get connected with Elon Musk and SpaceX and some other organization. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I'm only saying that if it comes up here into your awareness, and it's usually arising up from your soul, if it's something that your soul is meant to bring forth, you will find a way to make it happen. That's just the way the universe works.
Yeah, and you bring up another issue there, David, and that is about fear. And you brought it up before about the parental fear. Um, I really believe we need to pay attention to the emotions that are and the emotional patterns that we pass on to our children, which basically means as parents we need to keep working on our own emotional patterns
Right.
and learning from them. Now, I lived in fear for the first 50 years of my life, and on my 50th birthday I said, I think I've had enough of this. I've been able to handle anger. I'm a recovered angry person. I've been able to handle loneliness. Maybe I could handle fear. It was the last biggie and so I started looking at fear and realizing, okay, we live in a world of duality. We have light and dark and hard and soft and whatever. What's the opposite of fear? What do you think is the opposite of fear, David?
Love.
Okay, could be love. What I settled on was faith, which is related to love. Faith or trust. That when I go into fear, I don't have the faith or the trust that things can actually work out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that our minds go most immediately to the negative. So 99.9 times out of 100, if something happens, we have an experience, we're going to go to fear immediately, right? And so the big question is, once you're in fear, how do you get over to faith? And this is important for children to learn as well as parents. What I determined is I needed something bigger than me, so I chose God. And my technique is to ask myself, what if I had a written guarantee from God that everything's going to work out and I'm going to be okay? Then what would I look at? What would I pay attention to? What decisions would I make and what actions would I take? And in general, I mean, I've worked with this with hundreds of people. In general, what we do once we go, oh, well, if I did, I mean, we know we don't have the written guarantee, but what if we did? You know, it's just an imagination exercise. What we would do in any situation is keep going because so that's what you do. And you make decisions and you take action based on keeping going. I started doing that. What would that be? 31 years ago. And as here I am living in my RV, traveling alone as a single woman, which I've been doing for 7.5 years now. And people say, well, aren't you afraid? I'm not. I love this too. One of the reasons, additionally, that I'm not afraid is that I live on the principle of love. And that involves filling yourself up with love. And that's a main conscious parenting principle
Right.
also is to help your child. When our children are born, they're full of love. They're full of self-love. They don't question whether it's okay for them to wake you up at night because they need something. They just take up their space because they love themselves enough.
Right.
And so one of the big things in conscious parenting is to constantly bring your children back to what's the most loving thing you can do for yourself,
Right. That's a
because
beautiful.
we
Yeah.
live from the inside out. Once I'm full of love, I have extra love to give to other people, and that love gets reflected back to me. So I'm
Right.
never without love. And when I'm traveling around full of love, I run into a whole lot of loving experiences.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that interesting? And so just to be clear, if you're traveling around in fear, then you're going to have a lot of fearful experiences. Just to be quite clear about this. Fear is
Yeah.
a choice. It's like anything else. And the other thing that you need to understand is that fear is a product of the ego mind. And almost, I would say, nearly 100% of the things you're actually afraid of are complete illusions. They're not based in reality at all. Sure, there might be one or two things, like a lion could come through your window and eat you up. But the likelihood of that happening is like, tiny, minuscule. So the things that you're really afraid of right now are complete illusions. And the other thing that I tell my clients is I say, all right, here you are. You're 30, you're 40, you're 50 years old, whatever, how old you are, however old you are here now. You are here. And I will bet if you do a reflection and look back on the path you have taken, you will find tens, hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of obstacles that cropped up along your pathway. Somehow you got through every single one of those. You got over it, under it, around it, through it, whatever. You have a 100% success rate with every obstacle you have ever encountered in your life. What makes you think that the next one's going to stop you? This is what I tell people all the time, it's one of those things. It's kind of like hitting them across the head with a sledgehammer. Oh, of course, that makes perfect sense, So,
Hmm.
first of all, ask yourself, okay, I'm feeling fear. Is this thing really dangerous? Is it something that I need to pay attention to? That's the first question you ask. Most of the time, you're going to say, no, it's really not that dangerous. It's just a story I have in my head. All right. So, what is the truth of that story? That story is something that my ego mind is telling me because my ego mind has a fear. Well, what if you stop for a moment and actually listen to your ego mind as if it were, a frightened child who just wants a little bit of loving attention? What if you stopped and listened to it for a moment and heard what it had to say without judgment, without agreeing with it, without anything? You're like the loving parent. Wow, that sounds like it's really scary. I understand that you might be afraid. Yeah, I get it. And you know what? I'm glad that you brought this to my attention, because if you didn't do that, who knows? I might have stepped into something really bad. But I'm an adult now. I am an adult. I have learned all kinds of great skills for dealing with all these things that you're talking about. And I can protect you because I know how to do it now. So I'm thankful that I've got you to protect me. I'm thankful that I've got you to keep me aware of potential dangers. And I've got this covered. So I want you to be my partner. Keep your radar on. Let me know when you see stuff. And yep, we'll work together. Instead of letting the ego mind take over, you now have a partner that you can work with. It is now like your co-pilot, the navigator. And you might have to do this multiple times. I know I had to do it a lot. I still have to do it now and then. But the point I'm trying to make is it gets me now to a place of loving my ego mind rather than trying to fight it or trying to work my way through it. And we work together much better than we ever did when I was younger. All right. So that's something I teach all my clients, and I have taught it to my kids as well. And people really get benefit from it. So
I think that model also speaks to parenting. parenting can be difficult, but what we really want to do is realize that we and our children, the children we have in our lives, we're in a long-term relationship, and long-term relationships are the places where we work things out. And what we want to do is we want to become partners with our children so they can help us to see places where we're blind. We can help them to get through things. And the whole family actually moves forward as a result of that, as I mentioned earlier, not just for now, but for succeeding generations.
Right.
And so that's a beautiful model. I think what your model with the ego mind is sort of like a parent and child relationship partnering together. And that is, I think, a key focus of conscious parenting, that it's not just me parenting you, my kid, and telling you what's right and wrong. And I've been here longer than you have, so I know more,
Right.
kind of thing. But really, oh, this is something you're learning. Let me learn from you. Oh yes, I see this pattern in me that has happened now with you. Let me learn from that. And it's a
Yeah.
similar kind of symbiosis, which is really wonderful.
Yeah. It's a beautiful. I like that word symbiosis. I mean, it really is about two people living together and benefiting from each other. It's like what's the phrase? The whole is greater than the sum of the parts when you're in symbiosis. I think that's the phrase. And it's a beautiful kind of relationship. But you talk about
Right.
relationship. Well, the relationship with your kids or with your parents, depending on which side of this coin you'd like to look at, those are the most important relationships in your life. But I also want to say that every relationship is an amazing, powerful gift. It's a gift from the universe, an opportunity for you to really see, experience, and express yourself more fully by virtue of the fact that you've got this amazing other spiritual entity reflecting back to you what might not be seen through another entity over here. So it's a beautiful kind of structure, this whole relationship thing, and it's probably the most important structure for us here as we try to navigate through the physical world as spiritual beings having a human experience.
That was one of the things that I really got about 24 hours before my husband died in 2016. I was sitting on the bed next to him. Now, my husband was a very powerful person. He was a neurosurgeon and he was used to being top of the heap. And I met him later in my life, and I really had to be strong to, develop strength. But I was sitting on the bed next to him, and I said to myself, this man's whole life has been about teaching and learning.
Mhm.
That even when he was being a son of a bitch, he was teaching. And I
Mhm.
was filled with gratitude for that. And I think it applies in all of our relationships. Those people that irritate us the most, those children that irritate us the most in parenting, are the ones who may be our greatest teachers. And we
Right.
really need to perk up and say, okay, what can I learn here?
That's right. And you talked about even when he was being a son of a bitch. This is something that I've had to learn over and over and over and over and over again. You're being a son of a bitch. That's me having a reaction about something that this other person is doing. The other person is just being, period. And son of a bitch is what's going on in here. In here. It's the reaction, right? And
Yeah.
I I would never have admitted that, even 20 years ago. I would say, no, that guy's just a son of a bitch. Period. End of statement. That is a fact. It's not a judgment. But now I realize it's 100% judgment. You know, all of us, every single human being on the planet can be a son of a bitch at times or a daughter of a bitch, whatever. It doesn't matter. We can all show up in ways that irritate other people. We all have this capacity. And it's not, and some of us, not only that, some of us are really good at knowing exactly how to show up in order to cause those buttons to be pushed. Yeah.
Right. Especially our kids.
That's right.
That's the
That's
way
right.
they teach us,
That's
actually.
right. Yeah. And so the question is, are you going to continue to allow your buttons to be pushed and make the judgment about the other person? Or are you going to finally stop dealing with that and look at the button itself? Look at the trigger itself and say, well, what is that wound really all about? What is that? You know? And maybe you won't have a clue. Maybe it's something from a previous life even. I don't know. But it's still something that the reason that trigger is happening is it's trying to draw attention to something for you within yourself. So take the time, look at it, and bring some loving, healing energy to it. One of the things that I have learned to do for myself is, when I'm meditating, I'll do a body scan. And I'll just bring my energy down. I'll imagine I've got a little flashlight and I'm just shining a light on all the little nooks and crannies and crevices inside my body. I'll just kind of imagine that happening. And I'll just say, hey, I see something over there. What's that? Maybe it's over there behind my sternum. What's that over there? Is there some irritation underneath there? Does that irritation have a message or something that it wants me to hear? And then I'll just listen. And I'll do this for my entire body. And what I find is there are little messages that come out. And who knows? I mean, I might feel a crick in my elbow that says, I'm having a hard time moving my hand. What's that about? What's that about? Why is my hand not wanting to move? Maybe my hand needs to just be still for a while. Maybe there's a stillness. Maybe that's what it's telling me. You need to be still. You need to just relax. You need to loosen all the muscles in your body. And the moment I start doing that, I notice this tension up here in my neck releases. So if we give ourselves permission to just look within, who knows what amazing gifts of wisdom will show up?
And, this ties in perfectly as an ending for us with conscious parenting, that's really the essence, that each of us, we as parents, our children, we all learn to look within, because when we live our lives from the inside out, we make change in ourselves first, and then it's reflected to us from outside. It's the most effective way to live our life. And by using our consciousness and realizing that we're in a school and that everything gives us an opportunity to learn, we actually move fast. We move forward more easily, more smoothly, more joyfully. It's really an amazing thing, and that's been the advantage of what I happened upon way back in the 1972.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. So Ilene, I want to thank you so much for being here today. Folks, I want you to know that I mentioned this new book, Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment. And Ilene is one of the co-authors in that book with me, and she has donated a beautiful chapter that I know you're going to love. And the whole book is going to be amazing. And it's going to be published officially on October 7th of 2024. So keep your eye open for that. Ilene, again, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. Before I close out, I would like to give you, a minute or so to just summarize what it is you'd like people to take away from today's program.
All right. Well, I think my message around conscious parenting is that parenting can be very challenging and daunting, but it's also an enormous gift that, as I said before, we grow through our long-term relationships because we can't get away from things and people irritate us and so forth. And so please adopt, if you're parenting a child now, adopt the notion that you're a learner and your child is a learner. Help your child with their learning and let them help you with yours. And in that way, you can be joyful and filled up together.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Ilene. And also, you mentioned at the beginning you have this gift. There's 9 steps, and there's something else there, I think, that you wanted to share as well. Is that right? Do you have the link handy? You can drop it in the chat.
Uh,
That's all right. Don't
Can
worry
I
about
come
it.
back?
I will put
I
the link
sent
on
it
my
to you.
website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The other thing is a certificate if people, if people are parenting, for a half-hour free consultation on parenting
Oh, a
issues for
gift
anybody.
certificate. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Uh,
Well, thank you
but
so
that
much
list
again.
is just fabulous. I love
Right.
that list.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. So, Ilene, I love this topic. I love having conversations with you too. I mean, it doesn't matter what we talk about. It's always great. Friends, conscious
Thank
parenting
you.
requires dedication and mindfulness, but the rewards are immeasurable. By taking the time to be more intentional with your parenting, you can profoundly influence children's development, helping them to grow into confident, compassionate, empowered individuals. So take the time now while you have the chance to be present, and you'll create lasting benefits that will resonate throughout generations. I want to thank you
And they might
for
take
what,
care of you when you're older too.
right? That's always a good thing. Thank you all for watching today's program, and remember, you can catch the recordings of this and every other episode of my show on my website at lifemasterytv.com. I'd also like to invite you to remember to practice my life mastery mantra every day. It goes like this: I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, I'm David McLeod, your life mastery coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. And I'll see you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.